Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris, and today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 6, verses 1 down through 11. When I started working on a master's degree years ago, uh, the way it was set up, this was for people that were already in full-time ministry, and we would go for a couple weeks in January and a couple weeks in June and attend classes there. But before that, you had to do all the pre-work. Now, the very first class I ever took with this format was Greek, the toughest class that they taught. And the professor sent me this syllabus, and this is in the days before email and the internet and all that. So it was all just phone conversations. And I called him up and I made him go through every little part of that syllabus with me to make sure I completely understood all the assignments because he had so much pre-work that we had to do. And I wanted to make sure I understood it clearly. So I got all that done. There were like 10 different assignments I had to do. Was all ready for class, got down there and discovered that I was the only one in the class that had called him. I was the only one in the class that had done the actual assignments. Everybody else said we just didn't understand it. Okay, so you know what I'm thinking here? Ha ha, I'm passing this class easy. You know what he did? He said, well, obviously, if none of you did it, we'll have to change the requirements then. All the work I had done, irrelevant, pointless. It was all tossed out, and now I had to do new assignments, all because nobody else could follow the syllabus. They understood that as grace on his part. I understood it as, hey, I was keeping the law, and now you're telling me that was a waste of time. All right, we like grace. But think about this. If you were a Jew back at this time, and you have been keeping the law of Moses, then all of a sudden Jesus comes along. And now Paul comes along and starts saying, no, it's not the law that saves you. All that work you've done, that's not going to save you. It's grace. Does that sound like all the slackers just got an unfair advantage? Paul's been talking about the idea that we're saved by grace and that Jesus sets us free from sin by dying for us. And that's awesome. But he does know that some people are going to bring up that counter argument. In another section of Romans, Paul has already mentioned the arguments he knew his opponents are going to have. Hey, isn't grace a free license to sin? If sins are wiped away by grace, what's the incentive to be good? At least the law makes us obey God. Okay, that's a good argument. I don't know if it's a true argument, but it's a good one. And so Paul needs to have an even better counter argument to show them how grace works and to show them why grace isn't a free license to sin and how it does save us. So those are the questions we're going to be struggling with. How is grace not a free license to sin? It's not a bad question, and it needs a good answer. You can probably tell I have a brand new computer. It probably looks a little different. I'm struggling to figure out how this goofy thing works, so be patient, because every time I move my notes on here, anyways. Here's the logical fallacy in grace. If sin isn't held against us, that means we can just keep on sinning and not worry about it. Let's look at verse 1 here together. What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? Everybody likes the concept of grace. It's based on the idea that no sin we commit is going to keep us from God. He will forgive anything. That's all absolutely true. Even that awful thing from your past cannot keep you from being saved. But then the argument can be made that if grace wipes out all of our sins, aren't people going to take advantage of that system and just sin up a storm, knowing, hey, we can get away with anything now? Does grace mean we can just indulge in whatever we want without any consequences? That doesn't make any sense. Of course not. But why not? If God will forgive any sin, then what's our incentive to behave ourselves? And if we aren't held responsible, then wouldn't a system like grace lead us away from God and not closer to Him? Do you know, back in the Middle Ages, it was good if you were a king. It was even better if you were the son of a king, like the prince. Here's the thing. The prince, if you're a child, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna do things that you're gonna need to get scolded for, spanked even. But you couldn't spank a prince. And so what would happen is they would get another child to take that punishment. Whatever whipping the prince was supposed to have, they got another kid to take that whipping. This is literally where the term whipping boy came from. Let me ask you, how long do you think it took for the prince to be a spoiled, rotten monster? Because he understands, I can do whatever I want and somebody else takes the punishment. This is great. Is that going to make him a better behaved person? No. Where's the incentive to be good? Now, knowing that question is going to come up, Paul raised it before his opponents could raise it. Let me read that again. What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? Is grace a free license to sin? God doesn't really want us to sin even more so that his grace can increase, does he? No, that's Paul's point. That's not how it works. Okay, then how does it work? We know grace is supposed to draw us closer to God. But how can it do that if this system doesn't hold us responsible for our own sins? Paul needs a good answer to this question. So he'd better come up with a really great argument that will settle it in our minds once and for all. So, what's Paul's great answer? Tune in next time and we'll find out. Till then, have a great day.